we call it Saint Ambrose Live?
I mean, we could call it Saint Ambrose Live.
Let's just call it Saint Ambrose Live.
For now, it's going to be called Saint Ambrose Live.
All right. So let me write that down. I'm Tommy Acemoglu.
And I'm Robyn Spateholts.
And this is Saint Ambrose Live.
The first episode of a podcast that we are making for our parishioners.
An ongoing podcast.
An ongoing podcast we're committing right now to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Expect more of these. Be excited.
Be excited. So this project is sort of the result of, the current circumstances calling for a certain amount of creativity on the parts of the parish staff to stay connected to the parishioners of St. Ambrose.
Yeah.
So that's where this is kind of coming from. And the hope is that we will start by giving you just kind of like a state of the parish sort of update. And then I think we're going to try to talk about this Sunday's gospel reading.
That sounds good.
It's a little bit of maintenance, a little bit of scripture and spirituality.
Yeah, but hopefully at the end of this, you feel like you know a little bit more about what's going on at the parish. And we're all stuck at home, or some of us are at work, but for some of us, it's just a matter of time before we're stuck at home. Like, we aren't able to congregate in our church, and that's a bummer. So this hopefully can fill a gap that exists.
Yeah, no, well said. Hopefully we feel more connected through these different types of adventures.
Word. Yeah,
Word.
Absolutely. The word.
So as you all probably know by now, the bishop has canceled all masses for the foreseeable future, right? That's how it was worded?
And it's not just us. It's a whole bunch of dioceses are doing the same thing right now. Either they are limiting, they've released people of the Sunday obligation, or they have outright canceled masses, and we're one of those dioceses.
Special dispensation.
Yeah. Which is crazy. Never in any of our lifetimes have we ever seen anything like this.
I remember once him giving a special dispensation because of a blizzard.
Yeah.
Do you remember that a couple years ago?
Yeah.
But that was one day.
Suddenly a blizzard doesn't seem like that big of a deal anymore.
I know.
Yeah. I would have preferred the blizzard.
Don't say that.
Well, I mean, I would prefer the blizzard to a pandemic.
I mean, you're not wrong.
No.
In that respect. I actually got a call from someone who had a very good point, Tom, and I wanted to ask you, not to put you on the spot, but like, if the bishop decides that we can have mass again,
yes,
have we decided how we're going to let people know that that's happening?
I think what we're going to do is we're going to use social media. We have a platform called Flocknote. If you're not tied into that, you can sign up for that on our website. Flocknote sends out email and text updates. We're going to put it on social media. We're going to put it everywhere. So when we are up and ready to go, everyone will know about it.
Okay.
But it's just, I think when we start hearing things from our state and our federal government that says that we can start relaxing some of these precautions, then we'll get a sense that things are changing. And
definitely I'm going to make an effort to put in the description box of this podcast places where you can sign up for our Flocknote lists.
Absolutely, yeah, good idea.
Because if you're not signed up yet, I think it's the best way to keep in contact with what's current with the parish and what's going on. So
yeah, well, we've always had a thing with
the link below.
Well, we've had this thing with the Flocknote. We use the one that we send out to the whole parish rarely because we know how much people don't like getting junk mail, but I think we're at a time where we can put regular updates because we're all stuck at home. We just don't have any other options. So
yeah, and people want to know. They want to know what's going on. So that's the way we're going to do it. Keep your eyes on social media and Flocknote. It is worth noting that the chapel is still open.
It is, absolutely. Yeah,
it's from 9 to 9, right?
Yeah, something like that. I should know this right off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure it's 9 to 9. I'll correct it if it's not. But
yeah, we'll say 9 to 9 right now. But people are visiting, and it's not like they're visiting en masse. They are, people are being very respectful. They're not. No one's breathing on top of each other or anything like that. It's just people are keeping their distance. But it's nice to know that there's a place where you can go and pray.
Absolutely.
And reflect.
Just wash your hands before and after.
Yeah.
And don't touch your face.
Yeah, do not touch your face.
Do not touch your face.
Whatever you do, don't touch your face.
Don't touch your face.
By the way, I've never noticed how much I've touched my face in my life.
Oh my God, it's awful, right?
Yeah,
it's the worst.
Yes, I'm a chronic face toucher.
I'm a face toucher. Other housekeeping things. We wanted to talk about the food pantry for a second because this is really important to our parish community and just to us personally. The food pantry has different hours. They've expanded their hours of operation since all this stuff started going down. So the food pantry is now open from 10 to noon, Monday through Friday, and they have an additional set of hours Monday evening from 4 to 6. And we have the people who are running the food pantry are incredibly committed to keeping that resource open for people.
Yeah.
And I can personally speak to the fact that in the office we've received a massive uptick in requests for food from different people and supplies. And the word came down from the top that, like, as long as we have food in that pantry to provide to people, we're going to be open.
Well, I think a couple things. If you're hearing this and you're wondering, can you still contribute to the food pantry? The answer is yes. Even if you got to leave stuff at the door, just please do. What we're going to find in this situation we're living in is we're going to find just a lot of people in need and people who are normally not in need that are in need. And so whatever you can do to help keep those cupboards, stocked, that would be an immense help to everybody. Please, please, please contribute to the food pantry.
Yeah, absolutely. Monetarily or just in food, stuffs, supplies.
Yeah. I mean, we already know that one of the weirdest things that we saw as a result of all the shutdowns was just how quickly people went to the supermarkets and to Walmart and Target and just bought up everything. And if you're missing stuff, or if you have a surplus of stuff, you can figure someone might be missing what you have a lot of. Absolutely.
And I think that we're going to be seeing an upsurge in clientele coming in who maybe weren't registered before, because as Cuomo shuts down, necessarily has shut down like casinos and restaurants and movie theaters. Like I think about like the waitresses that I know, and like they're very concerned about where their next paycheck is coming from. And, there's just going to be new people that need help.
Yeah.
It's just, and I feel like the church is there to respond to that always. And
well, that's what the church exists for. I think if you have 1 million people coming at your door saying they need something, then it's our responsibility to figure out how to fill that need. And right now we're at the early stages of this, but we can be a place where we can mobilize and people can get the help that they're looking for. And we just need the help to be able to do it.
Absolutely. And I feel like in moments of crisis like this is where, our identity as a church really crystallizes and we really have an opportunity to shine in terms of helping individuals through times like this. So
absolutely.
As a community, I know the capacity that this parish has to come together, and I have no doubt that we're gonna meet needs and power through. So
right on.
The last thing, I'm going to throw the ball in your court to address this last housekeeping issue, and that is e-giving.
Oh, okay. So
talk to me about what e-giving is and why it's important.
Here's e-giving. So as you may know, this parish functions on the support of its parishioners. And if people stop supporting the parish isn't able to do what it needs to do. Hopefully, when people look at us as a parish, they see a place where people get help, and they see Christ's hands and feet in the community, and they see the value of the parish. And so we have as much a need as anyone else does to kind of stay open. E-giving, since people can't kind of come in for church and leave their envelopes as they have been, we have an option to give electronically. And so if you go to www.stambroselatham.com/e-giving, one word, e-giving, you can, and I'll say that again, www.stambroselatham.com/e-giving, one word, e-giving.
And I'll leave the link in the description box.
Good call.
After the Flocknote link.
You can give electronically. And the reality of the situation is there are going to be people who are just going to be really not able to give right now, and that is completely understandable. But if you're in a situation where you've been blessed and you're going to be kind of okay, please don't forget about the parish. We want to be the exactly what you want us to be, whatever we need to be as a community. We want to be that. We just have to be able to endure as much as everywhere else. Right now, the movie theaters are wondering how are we going to survive after this. Small businesses are wondering how are we going to survive after this. And I think no differently, the church is asking the same thing. And I'm just hoping that the church is providing something to the community that they see as valuable. So if you can help us with that, that would be great. Please don't look at this as like us being a money-grubbing parish. We're not. We welcome whatever people can or cannot do. There's no, we have people who come to our church who don't give anything, and they are as much a member of this church as people who give everything. But anything you can do to help will definitely make a difference.
Well said.
Well, I tried.
Well said, dude.
I tried. It's not an easy thing to talk about.
It's not. It's not.
Yeah.
Because we know how much, how much commitment parishioners have from the heart, and sometimes it's hard to address the fact that, without them, the lights wouldn't be on.
Yes, it's a reality.
The food pantry would not run.
Well, I a long time ago, when I started to work for the church, it humbled me knowing that my family is fed by the support of the people of the community. And it makes
Very
me
humbling.
Yeah, it absolutely is humbling, and it makes you think about what you can do for the people that support you. So I'm grateful if you're listening to this and you're a parishioner and you support the parish. Thank you, because you feed my kids, and I definitely appreciate that. And you also help support programs and initiatives that I hope make a difference in your life and the lives of other people. And that's what we hope we do.
Well said. All right. I think that was all of the housekeeping stuff we wanted to address.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to say as we're
if
entering Corona season?
I know, jeez. If you have questions or things that we can answer, you just let us know. If you're reading this on a platform that has comments, just leave comments and just help us, so we can make this better, and we'll answer any questions and we'll address any concerns that we can.
Yes, absolutely. We're here to serve.
Amen.
So if you have questions, reach out.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how to segue into this exactly, but I think it would be useful if we cracked open this Sunday's gospel reading for the benefit of us and whoever might be listening who's looking for, some spiritual content.
I think you just made that segue happen.
Yeah, look at the segue
What
roll
an
through.
Easy transition you just made.
I'm a professional podcaster.
That's right.
So I think that we decided that we were going to read and then stop and discuss paragraph by paragraph. This gospel reading for this Sunday is one of my favorites. I think it's a really phenomenal text, but I would probably say that about most of the Bible.
They're all winners.
There's not a bad spot in the Bible, really.
Yeah, that's right.
The Sunday's gospel reading is about Jesus healing the blind man. And it comes from John chapter 9. So I think I'm just going to start and read the first section, and then if you have a comment to make, Tom, just stop me.
Or, if you have a comment,
or if I have something to say too,
we might comment.
on Okay, so I'm just going to start reading. So it starts like this. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him." And I wanted to stop right there and ask you a question as the resident Bible scholar. Did people think that if you had a physical ailment, that meant that someone in your history had sinned and it was punishment?
Absolutely. Sin was considered something that could be passed on generationally.
That's wild.
Punishment was passed on generationally. So it was not far-fetched for someone to think that their sins had been passed on to somebody else and the ailments they were suffering was being passed on to someone else.
So this was a commonly held belief? Like, was it supported religiously, or was it just culturally?
I think you always have a little bit of both happening.
Okay.
I mean, the idea that sin passes on from one generation to the next, or punishment is passed on from one generation to the next, there's something about that in the religious tradition. But then you always have a little bit of what you call folk tradition. And I think the idea that somebody has it bad and they're seen as kind of a pariah, for some folks it's just natural for them to say to them, you must have done something wrong to deserve this.
And so the disciples are asking Jesus specifically to clarify, who was it that actually did the sinning to make this guy blind? Was it his parents or himself?
Right.
And so Jesus is just wiping this slate, right?
Yeah, he rejects the premise, right?
He's like, booyah, no, this is not real.
This is a totally different thing.
Yeah,
well, and I like that this man's ailment has a purpose.
I was just gonna comment on that. So just to reread that, Jesus explains that he's not blind because anybody sinned. He's blind so that the works of God might be made visible through him.
Right. None of us would see our hardships that way. I mean, most of us would look at our hardships as this thing that we have to kind of get past, or maybe it gives us a sense of shame or a feeling of failure. But Jesus looks at someone's ailment and says that, no, this is actually an opportunity for God to do his thing.
Right.
This is a good thing that's going to come out of this.
And this feels kind of apropos for this moment in time.
Yeah.
I feel like this whole coronavirus thing is an incredibly scary time because of how much is unknown. But I'm comforted by knowing that, there's nothing in this world that isn't a part of the purpose and the plan of God.
Yeah.
And that this is just as much a part of his plan as anything else. Like, we may not understand it now, or we may never understand it, but there's a purpose in it.
Yeah.
And that comforts me to know that, I guess. And here's the scriptural reinforcement right there. Like, why do bad things happen? It's like, well, because the plan of God is going to be made known through them.
Yes.
There's, it's like, why is there suffering?
Right, exactly, yeah.
Like, that's Jesus' scriptural explanation there. So anyway, I'll keep reading. It says, Jesus said, "We have to do the works of the one who sent me while it is day. Night is coming, when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And when he said this, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. So he went and washed and came back able to see.
Yes. So Jesus,
crazy.
It is. Well, absolutely. Like, Jesus's way of healing is very hands-on, and we see in the Gospels that Jesus has a lot of different ways he heals people. In the story of, for example, when he heals, the woman who has hemorrhages, she just touches him and she's healed. And there's the story of the servant of the centurion. He's healed from far away. We never even see the healing happen. But this is Jesus getting right up in someone's grill, making mud out of his own spit. And
why does he do that?
Well, some people in that culture...
Because he certainly doesn't need to do that, right? Yeah, he doesn't need to create that salve from the clay or whatever. So
no, but healers at that time would use those kind of tactile ways of healing. So we don't, subscribe to magic, for example, but there is in magic there is this kind of magic that's called sympathetic magic, and it's when you use like stuff to affect your the person you're trying to heal or change.
It's called sympathetic magic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it shares something in common with that. Like, it's not, we don't subscribe to magic, but it's
not magic.
It's not magic. Yeah,
disclaimer: it's not magic.
Yeah, please, let us be very clear about that. Not magic, but this healing is using stuff to affect the end. It's this man's healing, and it would have been a very common way for healers. Like there was a feeling that saliva had healing properties at the time of Jesus. So it's not surprising he would use that same kind of methodology.
All right, I'm going to keep reading.
All right.
So, He went and washed, and he was able to come back, and he was able to see. The next paragraph says, his neighbors, now they're talking about the blind man's neighbors, and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, isn't this the one who used to sit and beg? Some said it is, but others said, no, he just looks like him. He said, I am. So they said to him, how were your eyes opened? And he replied, the man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and told me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went there and I washed and I was able to see. And they said to him, where is he? And he said, I don't know.
Yeah, he literally doesn't know because he has never seen Jesus before. Even up to this point, he can say...
Oh, yeah, you're right, because he sends him to wash.
Yeah, so he's never seen Jesus before.
And he washes and he... I never thought of it that way.
That guy called Jesus.
I literally don't know where he is or what he looks like. Yeah, is there any significance to the fact that they point out that the pool of Siloam means, like the name means sent?
Well, sometimes...
What do you think that means?
Well, sometimes first of all, it might be just a connection to the fact that this man was just sent to go wash.
True.
But the Gospels, which are originally written in Greek, will throw in little bits from Hebrew or Aramaic just to kind of, contribute to the authenticity of the scene. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so the story progresses. It says... they, I assume they mean the neighbors here, they brought the one who was once blind. I like how his identifier changes. He was no longer the blind man, the one who once was blind. They bring him to the Pharisees. Now, Jesus had made clay and opened his eyes on a Sabbath.
Big deal.
Big deal alert. Okay, so then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see, and he said to them, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see. So some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath.
Well, two things. One is I like that everything that this man has done so far is just report what happens to him. Like
straight up.
It's just the facts. He just looks like that. So this thing happened to me.
And he sticks to it too. There's no difference between one retelling and the other.
No.
He's very clear about what happened.
He also seems very calm. I mean,
so chill.
He could be like, I'm going to go look at new things now. I've never seen anything before.
Never seen anything before.
It's a sunset. It's a flower.
I actually want to look at my donut when I eat it. Like, what does it look like?
That's right. It's ancient Near Eastern donut.
Ancient Near Eastern donut. Sorry.
But the Pharisees get caught up in this thing. The verse just beforehand just said that he cured on a Sabbath.
Yeah.
As we know, in Jewish law,
you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath.
No work on the Sabbath, and healing counts as work. So this is what they're hung up on. They're not hung up on the fact that this great miracle has taken place and this man's life was changed forever, but they're caught up on the Sabbath part.
Thing. And the Pharisees go on to debate, amongst themselves. It says, so some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath, but others said, how can a sinful man do such signs? And there was a division among them. So they said to the blind man again, what do you have to say about him, since he opened your eyes? And the blind man says he is a prophet.
Yeah, that's his... The idea that he's a prophet, I mean, that's based on the data that this man has. I mean, this man is taking in all the data he can. He's now seeing the world with new eyes. But based on everything he's experienced, Jesus is like one of the wonder-working prophets of old, like Elijah or Elisha. He's doing what the prophets had done. I mean, there's no room for him to be anything else. And the whole idea of him being sinful or not sinful, the man bypasses that completely and says, no, only a prophet could do what this man has done for me.
Only a prophet could do this. The story goes on. Now, the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and gained his sight until they summoned the parents of the one who had gained his sight.
That seems a little much, by the way. Once you get a guy's parents involved,
it's all over.
Yeah.
It's now the parents are involved. No, I was talking about this earlier to you that like this seems like the most logical way to go about this, though.
Yeah.
Like you don't really want to believe that this guy was blind, so you ask him, and then you're like, nah, he's probably a liar. I'm gonna talk to his parents instead. Like there's got to be more witnesses here
Mom,
that can. Mom, Dad. Where did I leave off? Okay, so then they asked them. They're asking the parents now. Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How does he now see? His parents answered and said, We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. We do not know how he sees now, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He can speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone acknowledged him as the Christ, he would be expelled from the synagogue. For this reason, his parents said, "He is of age, question him." Oh, I thought you were going to say I'm just... So the Jews have decided that...
Well, and I think in John's gospel, when he says Jews, he's not meaning like every Jewish person ever, because obviously Jesus is Jewish. And so his apostles are Jewish. And...
It's important to point out here, he's talking about the adversarial party in the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Loosely, the Pharisees, loosely,
some people
who don't believe in this
Some
miracle.
people will translate this as Judeans. You know?
Okay.
Yeah, which might sound a little...
Is that how you would translate it?
I don't know. I think you can make a case either way.
Gotcha.
But I think the context is telling you, no, it's not like every Jewish person ever, because that is just absurdity. But there are people, amongst his people who have a problem with what he's doing. Mm-hmm. Just like you find, you'll find sympathetic Pharisees in the Gospels as well. It's just what do we make of this guy?
So that really just means like the generic adversarial characters in this story.
Right.
So the story goes on. "So a second time they called the man who had once been blind and said to him, 'Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner.'" So they've kind of decided at this point, like, who they think Jesus is or whatever.
Yeah. And by the way, it's from our perspective, we look at this kind of differently. When we say give God the praise, I think everyone would be like, yes, let's agree with that statement.
Let's agree with that.
It's the
neutral thing to say.
Well, but we come from the perspective of, of a concept of God that is Trinity, as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And as the Son is God, when you say give God the praise, it's almost like saying, well, yes, we'll give Jesus the praise, just like we would give the Father the praise, just like we would give the Holy Spirit the praise.
So this guy replies, he says, "If he is a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind, and now I see." And so they said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" And he answered them, "I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" They ridiculed him and said, "You are that man's disciple. We are the disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but we do not know where this one is from." The man answered him and said, "This is what is so amazing, that you do not know where he is from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if one is devout and does his will, he listens to him. It is unheard of that anyone ever opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he would not be able to do anything." And they answered him and said, "You were born totally in sin, and you're trying to teach us?" And then they threw him out. So that was a long chunk, but I just wanted to say that line that he says at the very beginning of that paragraph.
Yeah.
If he's a sinner, I do not know. One thing I do know is that I was blind and now I see, is like one of the most, it just feels like such a human way to explain it.
Yeah.
He's just like, "Listen, guys, I don't know what to tell you. All I know is that before I couldn't see donuts.
Yeah.
And now I can.
Now I see all the donuts.
Now I see all the donuts." So,
Ancient Near Eastern donuts.
Yes, exactly. The Middle Eastern donuts. But it just feels like that's such a human sort of line to me. And it inspired this amazing hymn that we know, Amazing Grace, right?
Yeah.
That's the end of that first verse.
Yeah.
"Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see."
Well, I think this is a great way of summing up the whole life of faith, because it's like saying, like, let me just give you the matter of fact here, right?
Yes.
Like, guys, you can have all the debates you want about who Jesus is. He's a sinner, he's not a sinner, I'm the sinner, my parents are the sinner. But the reality is I was blind and now I see. Yeah. And so you have to make sense of that, right? And it's all of the theological arguments that the Pharisees are trying to make here are moot. They don't mean anything, because it's just like, this is a matter of fact. And I think the man does a great job, because you'll see that the Pharisees will always appeal to Moses. And Moses is great. Moses is one of the all-time greats. I love Moses.
Moses is great.
He is. How can you beat Moses?
No, I don't. I mean,
I wouldn't want to. No. He's the Moses. But they will say that they are appealing to Moses, and often you'll find Jesus in the Gospels appealing to God. Because it's remembering that Moses, for all as great as he was a servant of God. And what Jesus does is he's kind of bypasses the whole thing and says, well, you know what? I'm just going to appeal to my Father. I'm going to just appeal to God, because that's just the way this is going to roll. And, while they're arguing about the man, it's weird. The man does the same thing. He said, here's what we know. He lays out the argument pretty succinctly. He says, we know that God does not listen to sinners. So you're saying that he's a sinner. Well, can we both agree here that God doesn't listen to sinners? But if the one is devout, he listens to him. And then we have to deal with the other reality that he just worked this miracle in my life. Mm-hmm. So every bad thing that you're saying about this guy is illegitimate.
Right.
Because he has done this great thing. And then they just call him...
Yeah, and they
sin shame him.
They sin shame him. They get upset. It feels like they get upset,
Yeah.
He makes this very logical argument where he's like, how is somebody who's in sin going to do something like this for an individual?
Yeah.
Make blindness become sight. And it just seems like to me like the Pharisees, especially when they shout out Moses, they're clinging to the things that they've always known and the way that things have always been done. And they're confronted with this amazing miracle, but they refuse to open their eyes, basically, and see that something that has just occurred could change the world.
Yes.
Right? And they're scared, and they're clinging to dogma, and then at the very end of it, they just kind of like throw them under the bus, and they're like, you know what, you're a sinner anyway. Like, I'm not even listening to you.
Yeah.
Whereas the blind man, or the man who now can see, has had this experience, like this personal experience of having his sight restored, and he's just kind of laying it out for him. And it's...
Well, there's a reality to the spiritual life. No matter what your background is, this happens in churches. And in churches, often you'll find people who are sitting in the pews who once upon a time would live in a very different kind of life. And they may have very publicly and very audaciously sinned in tremendous ways, right? And all of a sudden you see them in the pew of a church. And it's very easy for someone to look at that person and say, well, I remember you when you were like this. I remember you when you did this. It's like everyone looking at this blind man and saying, I remember you when you were blind, or at least you pretended to be blind, or whatever it was. And the person who is transformed, they're just testifying to this new reality. Absolutely. And they're saying, like, well, in the case of the blind man, I was blind, now I see. And the person who, finds their way to a church, they could come from the messiest background in the world, and they're the ones saying, like, you could tell me whatever you want, you can give me every theological argument you want, but I lived this old life, now I live this new life, and it's because of who I met, and they changed my life forever.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So the last paragraph of this gospel reading goes like this. It says, when Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, meaning the man who had his sight restored, he found him and said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered and said, who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he. He said, I do believe, Lord, and he worshipped him. Then Jesus said, I came into this world for judgment so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, surely we are not also blind, are we? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying we see, so your sin remains.
It's a great bookend right there.
Dang, that's some wordplay, though. Can you crack that open? So what is it he's saying here? It's like,
well, it's so interesting. At the beginning of the passage, the whole argument is who sinned that this man was blind.
Right.
And Jesus ends this whole thing saying, blind people are not sinners.
Right.
Being blind does not make you a sinner.
Right.
And so he's just taken the whole argument that has been, building from the beginning of this passage and just ties it up in a nice little bow, right? And, the reality is that the gospel passage is acknowledging that there's different varieties of blindness. So
Yes.
it's already, we're in the first century, AD or CE, and we're dealing with metaphor. And we're saying, like, of course there is run-of-the-mill blindness, physical blindness, you can't see stuff, but spiritually speaking, there's this another kind of blindness, and the Pharisees represent that kind of blindness. They think they understand everything, they understand the way of the world, they understand what God wants, and Jesus just looks at them and says, "You are blind." And it's it's a different kind of blindness. It's a sinful kind of blindness, not the kind that the blind man has, which is faultless, but the kind of refusing to see who God is and seeing God's good work, and not to even look at a man who's been healed and say, that's a good thing that happened here. It's like the least the Pharisees could have done and said, man, it's really nice that guy can see again. But they don't. They just wrestle with him on how much of a sinner he is. But they can't even acknowledge the one good thing that's happened in his life.
And I feel like with that line, I came into this world for judgment so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind. He's talking about how him coming into the world, and he says in the way beginning of this gospel section, like, I've come to be the light of the world. I've come to do the light in the world. His arrival is the game changer. People are going to have to reckon with the fact that he's here.
Yeah.
And if everybody's blind spiritually to a certain extent, and then he arrives, and if you accept him, now you can see. But, like, if you're perfect, your sight is perfect, but you refuse to accept him, like, you're blind. Like, he's saying at the end, like, my arrival is the game changer. This is it. And I think, this is a lesson to me too. Like, I think just for me personally, like, when I feel like I'm in full control of what's going on for me, or like I've got everything figured out, like, that's usually a good sign that I need to stop and reflect. Because, like, there's no way you don't have it all figured out.
No.
The only person who really has everything figured out is God.
Yeah.
And, we have to be servants to his mission and his plan, and walking around with the kind of hubris that the Pharisees have in this passage is not going to get you anywhere except blindness.
No, the thing
It's just
about
very interesting
about the man's physical blindness is it humbled him. If you read through the passage, he is a very humble man, and he's just reporting things as they're happening. He's just telling the truth. And the Pharisees are very arrogant. And I think for our own spiritual well-being, we have to be able to see those things in our own self and say, am I being humble? Am I acknowledging my shortcomings, my failures, my inability to see? Do I look to Jesus as the light, to see things clearly? Or do I think I have all the answers? Do I have things figured out? Is everything wrapped up in a nice box, for me?
Yep.
And if that's the case, we would do well to humble ourselves.
Am I functioning in a routine, and am I going through the motions and sticking to, like, dogmatic principles, or am I consistently getting in touch with the heart of the message of Christ?
Yeah. And
asking myself to be emotionally and spiritually connected to what is happening.
Yeah, because
that's hard. It's not the easy.
No, the dogmatic stuff makes no sense if it's not in connection with the living God. It's just it will end up turning into a bunch of rules that make sense, that don't make sense unless it's connected to a living God. And then if you're trying to see the living God, who's speaking through, people and in situations, and who's impacting the real world. Then we're connected to him, right? But otherwise, we're connected to a bunch of rules, and that doesn't really save anything.
Agreed.
Right?
I love this story. The characters are just so strong in it. The man who was blind but now sees, he just has such a charismatic sort of, position throughout the whole thing, and I just really like it.
Yeah.
I think think that's it.
Was
that all your thoughts on that?
That's all. No,
amen,
summed
brother.
up. We
cool.
did it. It's
I
done.
love the Bible.
I love the Bible,
I know
too.
you do.
I'm a big old fan of the
You're
big old Bible.
You're a big old Bible nerd.
I am.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I hope that, there may be at least one person who listened this far through.
Oh my gosh.
If to that person...
You are so cool.
You are the coolest.
I'm so grateful.
Give yourself a huge pat on the back. A round of applause for you, that one person.
Yeah. You made it.
Who's still here.
We didn't talk for nothing.
We love you.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening, and keep your eye on our social media pages, and flock note, because we're going to try to do these more regularly, especially now that we're not going to have as much physical contact with you guys as we would weekly. If you have feedback for us on this format, we more than welcome it.
Yeah.
We just love talking about the Bible, and we love you guys, and we're open to feedback, though, is what I would say. Do you have anything else you want to say before I hit the stop button?
No, I think I think you said it well.
Did I? All right.
You did.
Super cool. We should come up with a cool sign-off.
We should. We should. Maybe we just end awkwardly each time. And then just trail off.
I think that would be true to our character.
Yeah.
Okay. We love you guys.
Yeah.
Have a beautiful, prayerful